This incident took place approximately a month ago during my visit to New York City with my family. We're avid fans of Broadway plays, and for our final show, we had the pleasure of watching Jersey Boys. Now, it's important to note the current regulations for attending plays in NYC. Prior to entering the theater, all attendees must sign a waiver agreeing to wear masks throughout the entire show except when consuming food or beverages. Additionally, proof of vaccination and identification must be presented to gain entry. With these requirements in mind, we eagerly entered the theater, unaware of the events that would unfold before us. As luck would have it, we found ourselves seated directly behind an older couple, whom I'll refer to as Karen and Ken. Right from the beginning of the production, Karen and Ken recklessly discarded their masks. The ushers had to approach them not once, but 3 times, requesting that they put their masks back on. The second encounter left a lasting impression on me. Karen responded defiantly to the usher, loudly exclaiming, "What?" She then rudely dismissed the usher, gesturing with her hand and saying, "Go away and leave me alone." It was quite an uncomfortable moment for everyone around. However, as soon as she walked away, her mask came off once again. During intermission, Karen and Ken engaged in hushed conversations, grumbling about the repeated mask reminders. Suddenly, security personnel and what appeared to be the manager approached them, requesting their attention. They were informed that a discussion needed to take place. "Why should we? We haven't done anything wrong," Karen retorted. "Ma'am, we cannot have this conversation out here. Please gather your belongings and follow me," the manager insisted. "I have no problem having this talk right here. Why do we need to move?" Karen countered. Ken chimed in, saying, "If this is about the masks, we've had them on throughout the entire show." "That's not what I was told," replied the manager. To cut a long story short, the argument continued in this back-and-forth manner for a while. Karen and Ken adamantly claimed they had been wearing their masks, while security and the manager insisted on taking the conversation outside. It was during this intense exchange that Karen uttered the infamous words, "If you want us to leave, you'll have to get the police. Otherwise, we're staying right here." Without delay, the manager disappeared momentarily, only to return accompanied by 2 New York City police officers. He calmly addressed Karen, saying, "Ma'am, you've got your wish. The police are here. Now, please gather your belongings. We need to leave." At that moment, with considerable reluctance, Karen and Ken finally collected their things and made their way out. I know this might sound extraordinary, but I assure you, everyone in the theater began applauding as they exited. Karen couldn't resist shouting, "Ask anyone! We had our masks on the whole time," to which a man sitting behind us retorted, "No, you didn't." The remainder of the second act proceeded in a peaceful atmosphere, allowing us to fully enjoy the truly fantastic show. And now, not only do I have a remarkable story to share, but I also witnessed a tremendous display of solidarity among the theater audience. 5 years ago, when I was just a 19-year-old university student, an intriguing series of events unfolded in my life. Let me take you back to that time, as I paint the picture of a tale filled with passion, deceit, and the pursuit of justice. It all began when I started dating an old friend, an 18-year-old cheerleader who attended a different school. Her name doesn't matter for this story, but her dedication to cheerleading was undeniable. With practices scheduled 2 or 3 times a week, I would often visit her school, enjoy a lovely dinner together before her practice, wait patiently for a couple of hours, and then accompany her home. Before our relationship began, my girlfriend had a previous connection with a senior member of her cheerleading squad. Let's call him Chad. Although they never officially dated, their involvement ended a few months prior to us getting together. However, Chad's presence continued to linger, occasionally causing turmoil in our lives. One fateful day, as I approached my girlfriend's school, Chad coincidentally emerged from the building. Our eyes met, and he glanced at me with a condescending smirk, his gaze sweeping from my head to my toes. This encounter proved to be the last straw. As I had endured his derogatory comments, his attempts to discredit me, and even his persistent pursuit of my girlfriend after we became an item. The accumulated frustration reached its tipping point, and I felt compelled to share the entire ordeal with a close friend whom we'll refer to as Dan. Dan, a dependable confidant and someone who had recently entered military service in the regimentation and discipline department, sympathized with my plight. He initially suggested investigating Chad's platoon for minor rule violations that could land him in the detention barracks for a few days. Petty revenge would have sufficed, as my mind hadn't ventured much further at that point. However, fortune smiled upon us when I casually mentioned Chad's Instagram handle, which contained a racial slur. Dan's keen instincts immediately identified this as a significant offense, one that could potentially lead to a 14-day stay in the detention barracks. In that moment, a spark of mischief ignited within me. You see, during my time spent with the cheer squad, I had absorbed various tidbits of information, storing them away in the recesses of my mind. One such detail pertained to Chad's military journey. He had once been assigned to a prestigious, arduous unit similar to the renowned U.S. Rangers, but had dropped out midway for reasons unknown. Sharing this intriguing revelation with Dan, he promptly accessed Chad's medical file. While he couldn't disclose the precise cause of Chad's medical downgrade, he cryptically confirmed the presence of a joint injury and a mental condition. Thus began a meticulous 4-month period of gathering evidence for Dan's investigation. I meticulously captured screenshots of every Instagram post featuring Chad participating in physically demanding cheerleading competitions after his enlistment, as well as images of him reveling at parties and clubs. These pieces of evidence could potentially challenge his claimed physical and mental incapacity. On Dan's end, he diligently built a strong case against Chad. The mounting charges amounted to approximately 15 months of potential detention, attracting the attention of higher-ranking officials who sought to uncover how Chad had managed to circumvent the system. Eventually, Chad grew suspicious of the unfolding events, possibly triggered by the additional medical examinations he was suddenly required to undergo. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he hastily deleted his Instagram posts and locked his account. However, unbeknownst to him, I had already secured all the evidence needed to expose his deception. With an airtight case against Chad, a military court convened to pass judgment. Presented with 2 options, he had to make a pivotal decision. He could either serve an additional 2 years in the military, potentially being deployed to a more stringent environment, or he could choose to settle the matter by paying a hefty fine of $40,000. In the end, Chad opted to pay the fine. While part of me had hoped he would be compelled to put his life on hold for another 2 years, serving his military tenure, the grand scheme of justice prevailed. I had achieved far more than I initially sought, content with the outcome that had unfolded before my eyes. We found an amazing luxury penthouse to rent as a treat to ourselves. We knew it wasn't forever as it was so expensive, but the job my husband had at the time was lucrative. The leasing agent screened and approved us. We wanted a 2-year rather than an 18-month lease, and the owners agreed. Then we got an urgent call from the owners that this longer lease meant they would have to pay another $1,750 to the leasing agent, and if we could reduce the lease on paper as a favor, but they would honor the 2-year agreement, we agreed and faked the 18-month lease to be good to them. 2 weeks into our lease, notices from the strata are put up stating the construction noise will be starting soon. A huge communication tower was being installed on top of our building. You can imagine what's next. Months of concrete drilling directly over our heads. And with our insane schedules in the film industry, we often worked 18-hour shifts into the wee hours and we slept a few hours during the day. We lived through this for 10 months. It was hell. We asked for some kind of respite, but to no avail. Nothing could be done. I was well aware of the rules that we had the right to quiet enjoyment of our unit. The landlords could have offered us time away in a hotel or rebated some of the rent. But no, we took video and photos of the notices and decided to keep it just in case. The amenities in the building included a hot tub, which we used often. Apparently, the strata decided that they wouldn't try to fix the problems when the health board shut down the hot tub due to contamination. We also knew that when a unit is advertised and rented with amenities, if an amenity isn't provided, you are able to get back the value of that amenity from your rent. so we kept track of the hot tub not being in working order for 8 months. The landlords were actually not really that bad. They were fine to deal with and actually fixed things in a very timely fashion, and did it properly. I didn't have any animosity towards them except their lack of help with the noise issue. Then, 18 months after our lease started, we received a notice with a rental increase. I was absolutely flabbergasted. They had agreed to 24 months, and here they were trying to up our rent 18 months later. This after we saved them $1,750. That's what you get for being nice. So we reminded them of the 24-month agreement, so they ever so graciously suggested that instead of an immediate increase, they would give us 3 months of no increase. Reneging on our deal. What a couple of jerks. About a week later, guess what starts happening? More drilling, right over our heads again. More construction. It was going to just last a couple of weeks, but with them reneging on our deal, we were mad and said screw it and gave them their 30-day notice. The Residential Tenancy Board in our province states that if they don't return the damage deposit within 15 days, they may owe up to double the deposit back. 2 weeks go by and no deposit is returned. They told us they were waiting for the amount owing on the gas bill for the fireplace before returning the deposit. 2 months goes by. The heck? You are holding our $1,750 deposit for a tiny amount. Screw these jerks. Now we have more than enough to go after them using our laws and rights. We filed a claim against them for loss of quiet enjoyment, loss of use of the hot tub, and for double our damage deposit. I had no intention of pulling out these cards, but screw with me, and I will use every ammo I have against you. We had a telephone hearing and ended up winning our case. So the early increase in rent could have gotten them an extra $450 plus the fireplace gas. That would have gotten them maybe $50, ended up the strata, stopped charging for gas. We were awarded $6,243 on top of the $1,750 deposit. Even funnier is we noticed the place advertised for rent for 2 months. So they lost that rent. Plus, they ended up renting it at a lower price than what we originally paid, so they never got their increase at all. Their greed at raising our rent early cost them a grand total of $13,243. This is my grandmother's story, and I love it. She worked for years under the former communist regime, in a very serious position, not usual for a woman at that time. She was the first female rails quality controller in the largest steel mill in the country. Now, most of you may not understand the seriousness of the situation. Under the east side of the Iron Curtain, if someone had a job, especially at a high level, he lived quite well. But if someone has exposed himself to the authorities too much, clearly demonstrated that she is mocking the power, you could lose everything in a minute. Be imprisoned without trial. Without witnesses. That was a real threat. So, back to the story. My grandmother repeatedly tried to explain to her boss, who was clearly not competent to perform his function, that he had to read what he signed. She was constantly given contradictory documents. On the same day, her boss was able to sign a document in which he orders to send 10 tons of rails to another city. And at the same time, another document in which he states that they should be postponed for collection the next day. And it was happening all the time. She was going crazy. So, Grandma asked and asked, "Don't sign anything until you've read it." And he stubbornly replied, "I know very well what I'm signing. Do not bother me." Until the day came when my grandmother decided she had enough. She received a letter from the governing authorities. They asked for some documents to be sent to them again, and Grandma wrote back, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have sent you this document a month ago, consignment No X. If your papers are in such a mess that you can't find a simple document, then I suggest you start sucking up to us instead of giving us a hard time." And then she gave it to her boss for signature, who, of course, signed it. She made a copy, put the original in her pocket, and left the stamped copy on his desk, meaning that it had been sent. When he realized what she had done and what the consequences of this letter would be for him, first, he chased her through half the steel mill, shouting that he was going to kill her. Then he begged and begged, promised her raises, just not to send it. In the end, he started crying, begging for her not to send it. She walked over to him, returned the original, and she just asked if he would read what he was signing from now on. He nodded his head, and as she tells the story, she said that he really started reading everything carefully from that moment on.